welcome back to Match Day Live. Well, kind of. We are coming out of a match day. It was a pretty good match day, and it's the closest thing we've had since the end of the CONCACAF Women's Olympic Qualifying Tournament, so just let us have this, okay? Joined by Oliver Platt and our special guest today, Josh Kloke. My name is Adam Jenkins. We're going to break down Der Klassiker, where Bayern Munich just about guaranteed another Bundesliga title. Gentlemen, how are things going and general reaction to the game? Josh, you're the guest today, so first word to you.
Yeah, entertaining stuff. I think that was a great advertisement for the Bundesliga just as a whole to a lot of people that, perhaps are unfamiliar, haven't been watching it, as diligently as others. It was a great first half, great pace, a lot of counterattacking, which the Bundesliga is kind of known for, and the pace in particular of Alphonso Davies, which I'm sure we're going to talk about at length. But this was, two teams that were up for it, and obviously two of the best teams in the Bundesliga right now. But again, what we saw in the first week of the Bundesliga returning is a lot of kind of trepidation in play, and maybe not as much physicality as we would have seen, beforehand, before these teams returned after, obviously the coronavirus pandemic. But we didn't see any of that today. I thought it was great, entertaining stuff for the entire match.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a really good game, good pace to it. It felt like a big game. Obviously the first match, the Dortmund Schalke match, was big on paper and a big derby. And whether it was because Schalke just went up to the pace or whether it was just the first match back, it didn't really quite live up to that from a competitive aspect, even though it was fairly entertaining from a goal standpoint, but this was much better. This felt like a proper game, and I thought Dortmund were a little unfortunate, to be honest. I thought they did a lot of things right and probably should have had a penalty, and you wonder if maybe Jadon Sancho doesn't really look right, so a few things didn't break their way, but it was a good match.
And it took a wonder goal from another Josh K to seal this one. You were pretty excited in the chat, Josh, when that one went in. Was that more luck or more skill or goaltending error like they were suggesting on the broadcast?
I remember taking a lot of stick because in the lead up to the 2018 World Cup, I was pumping Kimmich's tires to no end. I was talking about him being, a sure shot for the World Cup best 11. And we don't need to talk about how that World Cup went for Kimmich or Germany. But, he is one of the best. He was arguably, the best right back in the game. It didn't miss a he's transitioned into more of that kind of deep lying playmaker role, and he's been fantastic. I mean, I don't think we can call him overlooked because I think people that watch the game know, how he's the one that kind of pulls the strings for, one of the best attacks in Europe. Obviously, those deep lying playmakers don't get a lot of cred a lot of the time, but to me, that's just a sign of what a player like him, like Kimmich can do. And it doesn't happen often. He only scores a few goals every season. But no, I think he's also, to me, the player that's going to be the next face of Bayern, after Neuer eventually retires. And if Muller ever retires, he's going to be that next face. And I think maybe then his profile will raise a little bit more, but, incredible quality. And I think we all saw that today.
Yeah, as an England fan, I love the fact that Germany and Bayern had Philipp Lahm for 15 years, and then Joshua Kimmich walks right in almost as soon as Lahm starts to age and retire a little bit. So it's like a factory, the way these players are produced. It's ridiculous.
And Ollie, another tough day at the office for the home team. That's something we've seen a lot of. We were talking about it going into the match, wondering if we were going to see a bit of a similar story without the hometown or the home ground fans behind Dortmund, and obviously it played a bit of an impact. But what do you attribute all this home struggle to since the Bundesliga returned?
I don't know. I think it's a few different things. I think the crowd is definitely a factor at a place like Dortmund, where you have such a massive raucous atmosphere. I actually thought that maybe there was something to the idea of, I think it's generally harder to be kind of a possession team and a protagonist than it is to be a team that kind of sits back and counters. And maybe the long break and the lack of maybe match sharpness lent itself to the team that was sitting back and countering having a bit more success than they might normally do. But you'd have to say that today that Dortmund were that team and they didn't get the result. So I think there's probably a few things at play there. But it has been interesting to watch. And it will be interesting to monitor to see if it continues going forwards.
Well, one of the reasons a lot of casual fans would have tuned in today, aside from two giants in German football, was another chance to see Alphonso Davies at work. And the attention and the respect he's gaining around the world just continues to climb by the match. I personally didn't think he had his best game today. Obviously, the pace was still there, but there were a few errors and he just didn't look as sharp. But he reminded everyone in a lot of ways why he is a force to be reckoned with. What do we make of his performance today? Start with you, Mr. Kloke.
I mean, it was very much a classic Alphonso Davies performance. It was a performance built on speed at both ends. Maybe didn't show as much in attack as he did earlier in the week against Frankfurt. Perhaps as much as he's shown, against his big matches like the one against Chelsea, the first leg of the round of 16. But defensively, he showed exactly, what he is made of. I mean, it's an unofficial count, but I counted him up 3-0 against Erling Haaland, right? And this is, one of Europe's most, dangerous strikers right now. And he showed that even if he gets caught out of position at times, or even if he is dispossessed at times, he has that speed to get back, to recover, and show that kind of defensive sensibility that, maybe was lacking in 2019 in the Gold Cup, or maybe was lacking, early on in his career at Bayern. Just a very safe, clean, defensive one-on-one game. And to be able to do that after you've kind of sprinted X amount of yards at really incredible pace it's a treat to see. And I think if you were following along on Twitter, everybody's talking about Alphonso Davies' pace, and to see him be able to use that both offensively and defensively, because when we think about pace, we think about how it's used on the wings and how, wingers want to press high and allow, central players to kind of have space in the middle. But look, if you can use it defensively, it's another weapon that again puts him in that conversation as being one of the world's best left backs, right?
Yeah. Sorry, Adam.
I was going to say, I think Romelu Lukaku summed it up best today, just saying Alphonso Davies is fast as you-know-what.
Yeah, can't repeat that one on air. No, I think, like, Bayern have almost, to me, they've almost changed his idea of what defending is, I think. Like, there's the kind of defending where he's on the edge of his own box and he's having to be positionally smart and all of those things. I think he still struggles with that a little bit. I thought late in the game, there were some moments, as you mentioned, Adam, where he was, kind of getting attacked on that side a little bit. He's definitely better at it, but I think it's still probably something of a weakness in his game. But then there's kind of defending higher up the field and having the athleticism to press aggressively and to step into midfield. And then when you do get burns, making those recovery runs like we saw on Haaland in the first half. And he's really good at that. He has all the qualities to do that as well as anyone in the world, probably. So I think they've kind of changed the way he, I don't know if I'm just speculating, but it almost seems like they've changed the way he thinks about defending from that position. He can do it in a much more aggressive way in that team that suits the characteristics he has.
Right. Now, I don't know if you guys agree with this or not, but I found the mistakes I noticed him making more often than not today were attacking mistakes. And I think that's something where the coach will be fine with, because when he'll have the pass, it's just not right and on target or a little giveaway, he's gone back and got it within the next 3 seconds. So I think that's why you have a youngster who's able to make as many mistakes, small mistakes, mind you, but as many mistakes as he does, because he's able to fix them within 3 or 4 seconds afterwards.
Yeah, there was one in the first half where he ran into some trouble or misplaced a pass or something like that. And, counter-attack goes straight down his side and he makes the recovery run, right? And wins the ball back. I think it was just before the one with Haaland where he did the same thing, albeit not his fault. So he's so good at that stuff. And yeah, as I say, I think if you can have him defending in those areas and doing that type of defending, you can have a lot of success with him in that position.
It happens often when managers change over at a club. Niko Kovac was the manager at the start of the season, replaced by Hansi Flick in November. There's always a handful of players that seem to benefit more than others, and that's Alphonso Davies, because Hansi Flick likes to play that aggressive pressing system. And if you can have players that can utilize that pace all game long and are comfortable pressing at both ends of the pitch, then your press is more likely to succeed. And that's Alphonso Davies. So to me, Hansi Flick has kind of taken the reins off him, right? And you're right, Ollie, has kind of changed the way that he thinks about defending, maybe less in terms of being a technically strong defender and just using the strengths that he has, right? And that's why he was kind of signed for Bayern in the first place. So it's refreshing to see. But yeah, he's definitely one of the players that's benefited since Hansi Flick took over.
Yeah, I'd add to that as well that I think Alaba is huge for him alongside him.
Oh, sure.
You just kind of notice if you watch him when sometimes when the ball's not near him, Alphonso sometimes can maybe just be wandering around or switch off a little bit, and he always gets a word in his ear from Alaba, which I think has probably been pretty important for him through this whole run.
And that's been the story of Alphonso Davies, so far. I mean, when he signed for Bayern, there was a lot of people, and rightfully so, saying, well, where's he going to fit in a Bayern squad? One of the top 5 clubs in the world. It makes a lot more sense for him to be loaned out to a Schalke, a Wolfsburg, or whatever, a mid-table club where he can earn minutes and acclimatize to Germany. But their plan for him all along was to learn from the world's best players and just train and learn and watch. And that's not an opportunity that a lot of teenagers have. So you can see that plan kind of coming to fruition. And to me, it also speaks to Alphonso's ability to kind of soak up information, because it takes a lot for a teenager to be able to play beside David Alaba and understand exactly what he's asking and to kind of put those requirements into practice right away. I'm pumping his tires already as expected, but
that's what we do.
Well, yeah. You've been pumping his tires all day. This is a transition into a plug for your work earlier. Article on The Athletic, is Alphonso Davies already the world's left back? And that brings us to today's roundtable, or first roundtable, I should say, of the day. Is Alphonso Davies the best player in men's national team history? It seems like it might be an outlandish take, but I'm going to let Josh explain perhaps why not.
I don't think it's an outlandish take at all. I mean, what we're seeing is an entirely new crop of young, talented Canadian men's players that we've never seen before in this country. And when that happens, when you see them pushing new heights and starting to ask questions about whether or not, Canada can legitimately qualify for a World Cup instead of it being a bit of a pipe dream, you have to ask those questions. On talent alone, I think we've never seen a Canadian player play as consistently and play as well in a top league for a top club as we have with Alphonso Davies.
Yeah.
But we also have to recognize the fact that he's done that in less than one season, right? So his climb has been tremendous, but I'm the kind of, I'm a Rolling Stones fan. I like longevity. I like to see players and bands and whatever do it for a long amount of time. And experience is an intangible, but if we see Alphonso Davies be able to do this for 2, 3, 4, 5 seasons, there's no question. But I still think a player like Atiba Hutchinson, who has done so well for such a longer amount of time. And I mean, he's how old right now? 36, 37?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
I mean, that's almost double Davies' age, right? So once we see him do it for a little bit longer, and I'm not saying that, I think it's all but a given that he will get there. We don't need to anoint him, the crown just yet, right?
No, I don't think so. I think Atiba still probably doesn't get the credit he deserves because he's played in the Turkish league as opposed to, England or Spain or Germany. I think he has been, a Champions League caliber player for a long time. And so you still have to give it, if you're talking about longevity and you're talking about career, of course, it's still him. And you look at guys like Paul Stoteri as well, who had a long career in the Bundesliga too. But I certainly agree with Josh that in terms of, the high point, how high someone's gotten, I don't think anyone has played in men's national team history has played as well as Alphonso Davies has now at the level that he's playing at. I think that's beyond debate at this point.
And what happens in a year from now when we're having this, conversation about Jonathan David at Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's got the potential to do it as well. Yeah.
Right. So that's what's interesting here is that we're having conversations about Canadian men's players that we've never had before. And so, I mean, on one hand, I'm excited to kind of, hype up young Canadian talent. And it's great because hopefully that leads to, more interest in the game kind of at a grassroots level here in Canada. But we could be having a conversation about another player, 3, 4, 5 years from now. So we'll see.
Hey, Dortmund, when Haaland pulled up, Dortmund could have used a striker on the bench today, I thought. So maybe not too far away.
I think what makes this whole Alphonso Davies chapter so special is I can't remember if it was Bayern's last match, or maybe two before that. But anyways, I just remember sitting and doing a bit of work and prep for one of our shows. So I was only kind of half listening. But all of a sudden, I just heard the commentators go on a 2 or 3 minute monologue about how great it's going to be to see Alphonso Davies lift Canadian soccer to a World Cup. And they were talking about when it happens, not if it happens, because this kid has so much potential. And I think that's the superstar effect that a guy like this has when you have European media outlets where this is their game, talking about how big this guy's going to be. But has that conversation hit North America yet? Obviously, Josh, you're doing your best at The Athletic, and a lot of our colleagues here at OneSoccer especially are doing it. But has legacy media given Alphonso Davies the respect he deserves? And I'm not trying to start another Lou Marsh debate, because we know how quickly that goes downhill. But Ollie, do you think that legacy media has gotten around to Alphonso Davies fast enough yet?
No, but I think it's getting there. I think you're seeing more and more on, the sports networks. So, John Herdman was doing an interview on Sportsnet Radio yesterday, mostly about Alfonso, I think. And I think just the buzz it creates on social media, which is obviously global and isn't kind of constrained by those borders. And everyone is talking about Alphonso Davies right now. He's trending around the world. He was doing it at the weekend. He did it again today. People like Romelu Lukaku are tweeting about him. So that inevitably catches on over here, I think, and more people start to pay attention to him. I think it's going to take a bit more time before he starts getting talked about in this country to the level that I think he deserves. But that's just the reality of kind of, who is in Canadian media, right? It's a lot of people who have been brought up on hockey and baseball and sports like that.
Yeah, look, I'm inclined to agree. I think there are very few countries in the world where one sport dominates the kind of sports landscape the way hockey does here. I think if you look at some of the other big sports nations around the planet, there's usually 2, 3, 4 sports that people talk about. So you're going up against a behemoth in hockey in terms of, fighting for airtime, fighting for recognition. Look, let's not forget that it's still not easy for Joe Q Canada to see what Alphonso Davies is about. His games are not in prime time. Before the Bundesliga returned, games were often, on a network that was a paid network. So it's hard for a lot of Canadians to watch him play. And not only that, look, has he made a huge impact for the national team just yet? I mean, Gold Cups are Gold Cups, and they're not the kind of tournament that, again, Joe Q Canada is going to tune in for. And he was fantastic in 2017. 2019 was a bit of a letdown. So it sounds as if I'm saying that there's still a lot of holes or hoops for him to jump through. Maybe there is. But the upside here is that, at 19, he still has a lot of time to do that. So I think that there will come a time where Alphonso Davies is talked about more and more and more. I mean, we're seeing a generation of people raised on games like FIFA, where Alphonso Davies is the kind of player, person, brand even that, people can be a part of, right? And again, I say this as I've spent the last few years coaching 16-year-old, kids in the summertime. And look, the bar in terms of who these kids who they idolize from the soccer world is really, really high. We're talking about the Messis. We're talking about the Ronaldos. These are the players that these young Canadians want to be like. So again, it's kind of like the debate about, is he the best player? Or is he completely recognized in Canada? Not yet. Will he be? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think this situation has obviously helped because the Bundesliga kind of is the center of a lot of people's attention right now because there's no other sports, right? But I agree that, like, for me, that big breakthrough isn't going to come until it's in a Canada jersey and it's probably a World Cup qualifier against the USA or Mexico. And I know Canada beat USA, last year, but CONCACAF Nations League, does that really resonate with the average guy on the street? Not really. Not saying it wasn't a huge result. Of course it was, but in terms of the stakes, I think you need to put that World Cup attached to it. And when that happens, or if that happens, I think you'll see a big breakthrough in terms of the amount of attention he's getting.
2 final Alphonso Davies notes before we move on and then eventually say goodbye. But I ask you both this question. trying to get yourself into the head of the average Canadian, psyche joke you Canadian, as you call him. If he was playing in the Premier League or even for a Real Madrid or Barcelona, do you think that this is a different conversation and he's already at that level of national cognizance?
I don't know. I don't think it's massively different. Like I say, I think, firstly, he did have that big performance against the Premier League team in the Champions League, so that helped. Secondly, this current situation of the Bundesliga getting a lot more attention than it probably normally would, that helps as well. So I don't think so. I think Bayern is a big club, and probably I don't think it would be a huge difference if he was at Manchester United or Liverpool.
Yeah, I don't know how you could have written the Alphonso Davies story any differently had it been, Arsenal or PSG, right? Two of the other teams that were, that he was heavily linked to. The story is still the same. This is a refugee that comes to Canada with his family in search of a new life. He's given incredible opportunities here in Canada. He represents what it is, and I don't want to sound like, this is a Molson Canadian ad, but he very much represents what it means to be a part of the modern Canada that I'm proud to be a part of. So would it have mattered whatever club he would have moved to? Not really, because he's still taking that next step that no other Canadian player has. But if the rumors are true and he does move to Real Madrid in a few years, then maybe we're having a different conversation. But I think that's something that is missing right now too. And perhaps I'm guilty of it in writing articles about whether or not he's the world's left back. Like there has to be a level of just appreciation for what he's doing right now. And every time I've tried to ask John Herdman about Alphonso Davies, he gets this look in his eyes and he always tries to temper my expectations, because I'm trying to ask him what it's going to take for him to be, that player that takes the national team on his shoulders. And John has reminded me multiple times in conversations and press conferences that he's a teenager. He's a kid. He just bought a BMX bike a few months ago, right? So we have to kind of give him the chance to be a teenager. So.
Yeah, and I can think you can probably say that this wouldn't have happened anywhere else if he'd gone to a different club, right? He wouldn't have been hitting these highs quite as quickly. And, Bayern are the perfect fit for him. But if anyone predicted he'd be this good this fast, then, pass me on the next week's lottery numbers as well.
A quick rapid fire over under before we go. How many career Lou Marsh awards or whatever Canadian top athlete will he win? I'll set the over under at 2.5.
Don't care. Give me World Cup qualification and a few Bundesliga Player of the Year awards.
It's a tough award to win. It is, and I know that the voting committee or whatever they want to be called, they like variety. And look, we're seeing so many more young Canadians pop up in sports, around the world. So I got to take the under, but only I would still say 2.
Okay, I'll take that. Let's quickly get into the national team. We have a bit of time left. And the question I want to ask you both is, how will his experience right now, the success Bayern is having, help or not help him when he transitions back into the national team? And Ollie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so the big question obviously is, where does he play? And I think John Herdman in the interview I mentioned yesterday gave a pretty reasonable account of it, which is kind of, he's undecided. He thinks he can play forward, winger, left back, and I think that's fair. I think in the 2 USA games last year, we did see Canada trying to play a certain style. I think they were trying to play a style not totally unlike Bayern's and like some other top German teams, actually, where they're quite aggressive. They play high up the field, they take risks, and I think they feel it's embedded in the identity of these players that they have to play on the front foot. I don't think they feel that this team can be successful being cautious and soaking up pressure. So you can agree or disagree with that, but I think that was the way they were going. What obviously is going to be interesting now is that they're going to go into World Cup qualifying, hopefully, with much less time than they thought they had to work on that system and to perfect it and to fix all of the things that we saw in Orlando. So you're looking at, as an aside, we're probably looking at in World Cup qualifying, we're looking at fewer games, but more teams, and so a kind of condensed format than you'd normally play in the Hex. And so Canada are going to need to be ready from game one, because they're not going to have a ton of games to play that decide their fate. Right. So how that plays out in terms of, as I say, playing this quite challenging style of football in massive games, we'll have to wait and see. But I certainly think, the plan was at least, to try and adopt this high pressing, aggressive style of game and build around the qualities that Alphonso Davies has.
To me, it's pretty simple. You play your best players where they can be most dangerous, right? And if there's not going to be as many qualifying games for the World Cup, you have John Herdman has one of the few genuine game breakers in CONCACAF right now in Alphonso Davies. And if you want to get the most out of him, that means contributing offensively. So to me, I know that public opinion is swaying, but I still think he should be used as a winger on the national team. Does that make him weaker in the back? Possibly. But I still think that given the chance to attack, I think that's when you're going to see Alphonso Davies at his best.
Yeah. The big question is, can Canada have as much control and as much possession and play in the opposition half as much as a top team like Bayern does? And obviously, I think there are serious doubts as to whether they have the players to do that. And in that case, you may want to look at moving Alphonso Davies further up the field rather than playing left back. But we'll see.
Well, Ollie, you did the primary research the other day on Twitter. What was the general sentiment around Canadian soccer fans?
I think, like Josh says, it is tilting a bit more towards left back, but I think the majority still thinks winger or forward.
So just so we get it succinct, where would you play him? The question was, Ollie, you asked if there was a World Cup qualifying match tomorrow against the United States or Mexico, where do you play him? I don't need you to defend it. Just give me your answer. Where do you play him tomorrow?
I would play him either on the wing or at the most defensive role I'd play him in is a wing back with a back three behind him. I don't think I'd play him at a left back and a back four.
Okay. Josh?
Left wing with Jonathan David up top as well, and watch all of Canada fall in line for the Bundesliga greatness.
Hey,
okay, finally.
Great. Yeah.
Not quite yet. Finally, before we go, Ollie, you have an update for us on the Canadian Premier League.
So I think most people would have seen by now the statement that's been put out that they're going to try and get players back into training. So I think we, in the next few days, hopefully, or at least in the next week or two, we can hope and expect to see teams resuming the limited workouts that MLS have already resumed. So individual workouts, maybe in some cases, obviously it varies province to province, but maybe some small groups. And without wanting to speculate too much, you return to training for a reason, right? And that's hopefully to play a season here, which is obviously what we're all waiting for. So hopefully that means things are progressing in the right direction, and we'll have more good news on the way.
Well, Josh, this is the second time you joined us. Clearly we didn't scare you away the first time. Can we expect to see you a third time?
Yeah, well, again, when Jonathan David signs for Dortmund, line me up.
I'll be sure to follow Josh and Ollie both on Twitter, and keep tabs on Josh as well on The Athletic. Some great content there from you and your peers. Thank you both for being here today. This was a bit of an interesting show, but I like the format. I think it vibed pretty well.
Good to get back to a Matchday Live. I miss our famous intro music to our Matchday Live shows, but you can't have it all.
Still hear that in my sleep. Be sure to subscribe to OneSoccer on YouTube for all the latest content. Gareth Wheeler coming up a little bit later on today with Bill Manning, president of Toronto FC. Once again, OneSoccer on YouTube, the place to be. Subscribe to the channel, like the videos, follow us on all the social medias, and never miss a thing. We'll talk to you tomorrow on the OneSoccer Hangout.